It's a pleasure for me to welcome you to this presentation of the paper entitled Preference Representation and the Influence of Political Parties in Majoritarian versus Proportional Systems. This is a joint paper with Marco Portmann and Rainer Eichenberger. My name is David Stadelmann. We know very well that electoral systems determine the role of party affiliations for representation of constituents' preferences. Mainly, in majoritarian systems, we have the result that politicians converge to the median independently of the party affiliations. So, individual party affiliation should not affect the quality of representation of a constituency. In proportional voting systems, politicians may spread over the political spectrum according to their party affiliations, and thus individual party affiliation should affect the quality of representation of a constituency. Thus, the theory regarding electoral systems is clear and also conforms to conventional expectations, but looking at the empirical literature, there doesn't seem to be a clear and stringent empirical verification of this differential effect that party affiliations play under different electoral systems. A strict and stringent empirical test has to satisfy at least 4 conditions. We have to have a measure of congruence between politicians and the revealed preferences of constituents. Politicians must come from the very same constituencies, but they must be elected under different electoral rules. Politicians must be from both electoral systems, but they vote on the very same issues, so that we can confront politicians from both electoral systems directly. And most importantly and most challenging, we must observe politicians from the very same common party systems. Our contribution here is that we have an empirical test which really satisfies all these conditions. In particular, we use referenda in Switzerland, and referenda represent a preference ranking of policies against the status quo. Either you accept a referendum or you reject it. Thus, you reveal your preferences. The interesting thing with Swiss data is that we can match legislators' decisions with referenda data on precisely the same issues. We observe legislators' roll call votes in parliament, and citizens then vote on precisely the same issue in a referenda. Thus, we can directly compare what representatives do and what constituents actually want. And this gives us a new and natural measure of congruence. Let me say it in pictures. We know what these people here really do, what legislators in parliament do, and we know what constituents actually wanted when voting in a referendum. Thus, the first condition seems to be satisfied. We have a direct measure of congruence for politicians and constituents' preferences. The second condition for a stringent empirical test is that we need to observe politicians from 2 different electoral systems. In Switzerland, we have 2 houses. One house, the National Council, is elected by a proportional system, while the Council of States is elected by a majoritarian system. We have 26 different cantons and 26 electoral districts, and the districts are the very same for both houses. So we really observe politicians from the very same districts, but elected under 2 different electoral systems, which would be the second condition for a stringent empirical test, which is satisfied. The third and fourth condition is that we need to observe politicians who do the same decisions in both houses. We have 26 referenda from 2007 to 2011, and we really have the same decisions in the National Council and in the Council of States. Thus, the third condition is satisfied, and most importantly, there is a common party system for both houses. We observe the same major parties in the lower house and in the upper house. And we have information on individual party affiliation for all members of parliament. Thus, we really observe politicians from the same parties elected under different electoral systems, representing the same constituents and deciding on precisely the same issues, which satisfies all four conditions for a stringent empirical test. Having said that, and having given you the conditions for the stringent empirical test, we can already come to the main results, which can be represented in a simple graph regarding the differential influence of parties on congruence depending on the electoral systems. What we observe is that when comparing members of the National Council, which are proportionally elected, with members of the Council of States, is that we observe that matches with a constituency's preferences are always lower for members of the National Council than for the Council of States. Thus, on average, majority-elected senators, councillors of state, tend to have a higher level of congruence than proportionally elected members of the National Council. More importantly for our test, we observe that national councillors from left and from right parties deviate significantly more from constituents' preferences than representatives from the center. Thus, under a proportional electoral system, we observe that party affiliations play a role. Under majoritarian electoral systems, we observe that there are only minor and insignificant differences in congruence between different party members. So we cannot state that party plays a significant role. Of course, we provide a large number of further results and robustness tests in logistic models with district fixed effects, additional controls, rolling regressions, etc. The result always remains the same. The result is that majority-elected politicians represent the majority of their constituents independently of party affiliation. However, party affiliation of politicians influences representation under proportional rule, and we provided a strong and stringent empirical test for the common theory and the conventional expectations. We use a new and natural measure of congruence. We observe politicians from different electoral systems. However, the politicians decide on the very same issues, and they come from the very same common parties which are represented in both houses. So we provide a direct empirical test for the common theory that party affiliations play a differential role depending on the electoral system in place. Thank you very much for your attention.